Familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name.
Former FBI agent Kyle Seraphin, who recently received a letter from the FBI saying, be quiet about this. Kyle, welcome to the show. You're not following orders.
So, Kyle, you had some issues that brought you here as a whistleblower. Joining me now to discuss is FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin. Kyle, thanks for spending some time with us again. Joining me now is FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin. Joining me now is a frequent guest of the show, former FBI special agent whistleblower as well, Kyle Seraphin.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Right, we're lucky to have him with us today. He's Kyle Seraphin, a real whistleblower himself.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Why did you decide to become a whistleblower?
I just made a decision that this is America's information, it's not mine, and I'm not going to let the FBI steamroll me and my family.
Kyle Seraphin, he's a former FBI agent. He's the host of the Kyle Seraphin podcast, and he joins us on the phone. Hello, Kyle. Great to have you back with us, sir.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Kyle Seraphin.
Let's turn it over to two former FBI special agents turned whistleblowers who are holding the Bureau accountable, Steve Friend and Kyle Seraphin.
A brave FBI whistleblower who is a friend of our show, also Dan Bongino's. Kyle Seraphin. He's the host of something that strangely is called The Kyle Seraphin Show. Follow him on Twitter. I'm Sebastian Gorka. I'll call you later. We'll talk guns. We'll talk optics.
All right. Any update on your whistleblower situation?
No, I expect to be attacked for the foreseeable future.
Okay. At least you're realistic. Thanks so much, Kyle.
All right, Kyle Seraphin, former FBI agent, also host of the Kyle Seraphin podcast. Thanks as always, Kyle. Good to talk to you today, sir.
Perfect, man. God bless you, brother. Thank you for standing up for the truth, man. Thank you for coming on.
Steve, Kyle, you guys are great Americans, and it's an honor to have you on the program. Have a great weekend.
And follow him, Kyle Seraphin, with a PH on Twitter. God bless you, Kyle. This is
Well, so Kyle, thank you so much for joining us. Great chatting with you.
Kyle Seraphin, thank you.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Monday. It is August the 21st, and we are streaming live from Liberty Hill, Texas, America. If you are watching us on anything other than Rumble, you are missing out on the community live chat here. I see many of you have already started getting rowdy. And for some reason, there's a thing going on in the chat that is Seraphans, Seraphans, Seraphans. What is going on with the Seraphans? Do you know what that is, Ryan? Who started
No
this?
idea, but I dig it, man. I like it.
We got Seraphans in the live chat. Folks, you can join us over on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin/live for the live show, wherever you're looking, or you can just do /Kyle Seraphin. It'll get you to our main channel. You can click through any of our interviews, and I really recommend you go and check the one that we did with Tara Reid the other day. Tara Reid, sorry, Tara. Check out that long interview, which we did direct from Moscow, from Russia with love. I think the story that was told there has been actually haunting me for the last couple of days. It's mostly haunting me because of her positive outlook on being in Russia and the way that it sort of turns the tables on us. And in that way, a country that we grew up on thinking it was under, the thumbprint of the USSR that was being squashed, and freedoms and all of the liberties that we enjoyed as Americans were turned on their heads, maybe are being turned on their heads over there. And now we are a country full of tyranny. We're going to talk about tyranny today. We're going to talk about taxation, which, taxation is theft. I think we can all agree on that. But how bad is that theft? How much are they taking from us? We're going to kind of explore a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the fact that I think the founding fathers would have been stacking redcoats neatly in the corner of their hunting lodges at this point, because we have given so much ground up. And the answer to that is never again. We can't do it ever again. I'm seeing a lot of trending information about masks and COVID, and it's summer and it's pretty out, so nobody's paying attention to the news cycle. They're out doing things that people do with their kids. They're out there playing in the pool. They're going to the splash pad, and they're getting ready for back to school. By the way, I had just a horrible experience at IKEA with back to school shopping. There's nothing I hate more than going to IKEA for back to school shopping, folks. But all this stuff is going on, and in the meantime, our government is ratcheting up the tyrannical capabilities, and they're hoping that you will memory hole everything else that's going on right now. So we're going to get deep into a lot of the weeds there. We're going to talk about what the government does with your money once they have it, and they get a lot of it. And we're going to start first, though, by thanking our sponsors, talking about money, because that's what's keeping us rolling right now. Let me start with my friends over at Catholic Vote. This is the website. You guys know how to get there, catholicvote.org. You don't have to be Catholic to be interested in faith, family, and freedom. In fact, those are the things that we are most interested here at the Kyle Seraphin Show. I don't know that I ever introduced myself as a Catholic other than when I went into the military. You have to put it on your dog tags. I remember doing that. Maybe when I was in high school, it was a big deal because I went to a Catholic high school. It was pretty obvious. It was on all our jerseys, our uniforms for sports and things like that. But in most of my adult life, I've never gone out and told anybody about this. This is not the way that I've introduced myself until recently. And it is a thing that I think is worth touting at this point. Wearing your Christian faith as a badge of honor because the government has now deemed it unnecessary and dangerous. It has been shut down. Let's support Catholic Vote. You guys can go and put in your email address, get the loop. If you want to donate to their causes, they are suing the FBI and helping fight back for pregnancy centers that were burned down. They are trying to get information and update the tallies on what's been going on in this country when our tax dollars are being abused, particularly against our First Amendment liberties like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to petition the government, freedom to gather and assemble with those that we wish. Catholic Vote is America's top advocacy group. And you know what else they do? Ryan, they put out the loop. They put out the loop, which I'm a big fan of. There it is right here. There's today's loop. Admin scolds court for curtailing abortion pill. The Biden administration is mad about this. This looks like actually not recently. This is not even the today's loop. What is the real loop? Here it is. I already pulled this up. There it is. Candidates pushing to disqualify or trying to qualify for the first debate. We're actually going to talk a little bit about some of the political candidates for the Republican, the GOP primary debate. Illegal migration rising again. Go figure. CBP is reporting new numbers. We've got Maui residents blasting Biden. Well, we could talk a little bit about that probably ourselves. How about the mental health crisis among children being overwhelmed in emergency rooms? My wife brought this up to me. Actually, she brought this up over the weekend, telling me that the number of children showing up in emergency rooms related to anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts or attempts is increasing. Maybe we are living in a country that is without hope, and it does that sort of thing. ESG is losing face at the top climate companies. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of good things in there. Check out the loop. I highly do recommend it. It actually is a really good survey of what's going on in this country. So if you're not doing that, you are missing out. And I'm just seeing, I look over every once in a while and I catch you guys in the live chat. Are they associated with Catholic Charities? They are not. They are a lay organization of people that are an advocacy group for Christian values more fundamentally. So Catholic, the word itself actually means sort of universal Christian church. And they really do push pretty universal values. They are not going after a specifically Roman Catholic ideology. They are really broadly interested in pro-life, pro-family, pro-faith, pro-freedom. These things are pretty easy to get behind. So I recommend that. Also, I want to say a couple thanks over here to our friends who have been yelling about freeing the merch. I know we're doing long form here, but there it is. There is the merch. you go to the-suspendables.com. If you go to the Suspendables without the dash, there's a hockey website. You will not get our merch. But the-suspendables.com, you'll get to Garrett's website with the Suspendables collection, all kinds of great t-shirts in there. The PT shirt should be on way because I'm going to start working out in that. I'll wear it around my neighborhood. We're big and appreciative of that. And lastly, and before we get any further along, do we have a video, Ryan, of you running around with a Patriot cooler tumbler?
I got it.
Let's run that, folks. This is what happens when you let Ryan off the chain. He runs down into Texas, he gets out of Michigan, and he feels the freedom of Texas America. So he runs around. Let's see what they got.
Here in Lagula, Texas, out here tracking illegal aliens that are crossing the border. Behind us is the Rio Grande over there. It's 105 degrees out, sweating my ass off. Couldn't be hotter, honestly. Backpack gear, you name it. The only way I'm staying hydrated is thanks to Kyle Seraphin and Patriot Coolers. These 32-ounce American Pride Patriot tumbler has kept my drinks ice cold this entire trip. You won't find a better guy or a better company that supports American Patriot, that supports our values, that's willing to go above and beyond to make sure that the brave men and women, the whistleblowers that are coming forward, have a source of income. They donate to veterans. They do it all. They sponsor the Kyle Seraphin podcast. And that's a company that I want to be around. That's a company I want to support. Visit patriotcoolers.com/Kyle Seraphin and get 10% off the latest Patriot coolers, tumblers, coolers. Probably got some sweet merch, coffee mugs, coffee cups, you name it. Grab yourself some, grab your friends and family some. Support the show. Again, my name's Ryan Mehta. I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Here's mine sitting on the desk right now. My wife filled it up for me. Patriot baby count. We are still in overtime, folks. We have not had the baby yet. Obviously, I am here. But yes, the Free the Cup campaign was successful. We really appreciate it. Let's dive right into our topics. If you want to get a Patriot cooler tumbler, go to patriotcoolers.com/discount/Kyle, or just use promo code Kyle, Kyle. Promo code Kyle, 10% off. All right, let's rock and roll. Topic number one. Guys, you're going to be really excited about this. Last week, New Zealand, one of those great bellwether locations that told us exactly how to handle COVID the right way, a tiny little population on a tiny little island that had all the same problems everyone else did with COVID. They declared on the 14th that COVID is officially over. The COVID restrictions are over. Let's bring up topic number one, if you would, Brian. We've got Reuters reporting that it is over. There it is. We're so excited. New Zealand's government will lift all the remaining COVID-19 requirements midnight on Tuesday, bringing an end to some of the toughest COVID-19 pandemic rules in the world. For more than 3 years, these things were put in place. Their Minister of Health. I like when they have ministries. You guys know what the word ministry is? It comes from a Latin word to send. I think that's really fun. These people will no longer have to wear masks in healthcare facilities or isolate for 7 days after contracting the virus. They are joining the world community and saying, COVID is officially over. While our numbers continue to fluctuate, we have not seen the dramatic peaks that characterized COVID-19 rates during the last year. And this, paired with the population immunity level, means that the cabinet and I are advising that these positions safely remove the remaining COVID-19 requirements. Well, hallelujah and hooray. I think I put another one up there from the AP. I think it's topic number 2. They said they were closely watching. Everyone wanted to see how New Zealand handled it. And the reason why is because it's a closed circuit in many ways. They have a limited number of outside visitors. They are on an island. They have a pretty homogenous population. And so there you go. You've got the COVID-19 restrictions. The Prime Minister said the requirement to wear a mask in hospitals and other healthcare facilities would end at midnight as a requirement for people who caught the virus, and they don't have to deal with it. They were really, if you remember, the darling of the international community because they put this nationwide lockdown on. They had strict border controls. Weird, strict border controls. Are we going to talk about that later, Ryan? Strict border controls?
Oh, most definitely.
I just saw a video of you walking around on the border. That seemed like it was pretty squared away. The United States had some border patrol pieces under Title 42 that wore off because, the U.S. is ahead of the curve on this stuff. But the most exciting thing, they had 3,250 New Zealanders died in a population of 5 million. I actually want to do the math on that while we're sitting here and talking. I didn't see that earlier, but that's 3,250 people died out of 5 million times 100. So that's a 0.065%. Not even 0.1%. It's half of 0.1% of people that had COVID in New Zealand died. So way to go. The restrictions and the tyranny was obviously worth it. Pretty interesting as one of these little case studies that they like to do. They talk about the sacrifices that everybody had to make. Yeah, they just had to give up all their guns like they did from after the Christchurch shooting. They had to give up all their freedoms to move. They had to give up all their freedoms to dress themselves the way they wanted. They had to put a mask everywhere they went. Yeah, that seems fine, right? Let's just shut down all of it. A country that was apparently not interested in the fundamental promises of liberty. And while that is going on, and they're so pleased that they are going to be shutting this thing down, we at least have some pushback in the United States. I actually think they were a harbinger of the evils that exist. I'm actually looking at a website here that I didn't send to Ryan. This is from the United States Department of Labor. In the United States, land of the free, home of the masked, COVID-19 admission levels and masking requirements. The DOL, Department of Labor, COVID-19 health and safety protocols can be found on the DOL COVID-19 Workplace Safety Plan. The masking requirements align with guidance from the Safer Federal Workforce Task Force that's tied to 3 different COVID-19 admission levels. Now, you may not be tracking this. You may not be aware of it, but the CDC is actually still out there putting numbers available to the public and to your federal government offices so that they can make fantastic masking decisions, and they are based on low, medium, or high levels of transmission. No further information. I looked, I am still in a low area in Williamson County here in Texas, and Travis County, which is the main city, Austin, still a low. And yet, I had no idea that they were still doing these things. There is still, it's one of those funny pieces that Reagan always talked about, that the idea of eternal life on Earth, there's nothing closer to that than a government program. The CDC has gotten its hooks into the American populace, into population-based COVID-19 studies. This is one virus. We're talking about a government agency that is designed to handle all infectious diseases. Every single communicable and infectious disease, they're supposed to handle research and data, and they're supposed to make policy recommendations and so on. And they have gotten full hog behind COVID-19 as maybe the only threat to American life and liberty. How is that? How did they decide that this one virus that came out of nowhere that has a 0.065% kill rate in New Zealand, and I don't know what the numbers are here because the numbers are not good. They're made up. They're completely fudged, as we've seen. They were counting deaths with COVID and not deaths from COVID. There was no way for us to tie the actual death numbers in this country to have any meaningful policy recommendations. And yet we have a CDC, a full government agency behind it that does nothing but run COVID stuff. In fact, if you go to their website, like they're COVID-19 all the time. Oh, and also wildfire smoke. I'm sure we'll talk about that later on this week. I just kind of want to see what's happening. There's some strange information coming out of Maui, and it's not very useful to me because it's just doesn't. There's left and there's right, and it's polarized. And we're talking about space lasers, and we're talking about whether it was intentional fire setting. I just don't think the data is there yet for us to figure it out. What we do know is that Hawaii is a very blue state, and they voted for really bad policies. And shockingly, the government, which is supposed to protect and save you, didn't do that thing. And I think that actually plays really well into what's been going on with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. It says, actually, if you look at their website, it says CDC 24/7, saving lives, protecting people, trademarked, TM. They trademarked their crappy slogan, saving lives and protecting people. To me, that's sort of shocking. But they also are really good at disseminating information that's favorable to their regime. It is all about CYA over at the CDC. And I just read a story about a Michigan teen who was 13 years old, 13-year-old boy, who died in his sleep 3 days after getting the second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. And he had a systemic bacterial infection. The CDC came out and said he didn't die because of the vaccine. Obviously, that would not be good for business, and they are in the business of vaccines. So that wasn't what was going on. What was really happening was he had a systemic septic infection, and they were able to isolate the bacteria, Clostridium septicus, sepsis, bloodstream infection. That's what got him. Toxins that came out of there. Of course, he had myocarditis, but that came from the bacteria. Do you want to know how many people die from now I have to septicum, C. septicum. Sorry, Clostridium septicum. There's only there's only 6 people under the age of 18 that die in any given year. It's less than 10. So this kid just randomly, an otherwise healthy kid, went to bed, woke up, or didn't wake up at all, and had nothing to do with the vaccine. And the debunking agency is the CDC. Go ahead.
I got a video that shows there's 120,000 children have been killed from the COVID-19 vaccine.
You want to roll it?
Pretty wild. Yeah, I got it if you want it. Yeah.
Take a look. Let's do it.
Breaking news, CDC admit 120,000 US children died suddenly following COVID jab rollout. Media blackout, a bombshell report from the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has revealed that a staggering 120,000 American children died suddenly following the rollout of the mRNA COVID jabs. Obviously, they're not reporting on this. There's media blackout on that, on the Joe Biden crime family, and they just like reporting a indictment that's happening every 2 weeks or 3 weeks from a former president who's done nothing, absolutely nothing wrong, because obviously they're getting caught. The Matrix has been exposed.
Everybody wants to tie it back into the Matrix. I'll tell you what, the Matrix was well ahead of its time when it came out in the late 90s. I remember seeing it when I was in high school, so I think it was like 98, 99, the original one. The fact of the matter is the CDC is running top cover for information that is not readily available. And if you want to tell me that this kid died from that, maybe he did. Maybe it was just a total coincidence that 3 days earlier he had gotten another COVID shot. Or maybe these shots have something to do with the fact that a lot of people are turning up dead. And myocarditis, which is a known side effect, is not necessarily from the toxins created by this bacteria, which kills less than 10 children under the age of 18 per year in the United States. It just seems highly convenient that they were able to pin it on an incredibly rare blood infection and the odds that that would happen. But all that is in aid of something else that's going on. They need to discount. They need to make sure that you are interested in getting those shots. I think there's actually a study that I saw and I didn't post it for you, Ryan. It said there's some studies going on right now that suggest to you that depending on the arm that you get injected with, the COVID-19 shot can be more effective. So the shot placement is actually relevant to its efficacy. Does that make any bit of sense to anybody out there in the world, that if you choose the muscle mass on your right deltoid versus your left deltoid, that you're going to somehow see an increased result? That the protection is going to be higher? I mean, this is full on paganism. This is a full-on religion of people that are buying into it. Luckily for us, I think we've seen that there's at least a little bit of a pushback, particularly in places like Texas, where I'm living right now. If you'll pull up, I think it's topic number 3 that I put on there, the Texas Tribune reported in June, and this is an ongoing sort of thing. This is kind of where we're going with this. In June, they reported that there was a ban for COVID mass vaccines and no shutdowns allowed under this new Texas law that was signed into law. It takes effect on September 1st, so has not yet gone into effect. But in 10 days here in Texas, America, we will have a law that will now restrict pandemic rules. It doesn't slow down private entities. So if you want to go into a store and they have a mask requirement, you can choose whether or not to comply with said requirement. What it says, but however, it's the most important thing is that they've actually shut it down from the governmental end. And we should not see, theoretically, small governments going against it. However, I wouldn't rule it out. What it does say is that it's a largely symbolic debate to the average Texan. The pandemic is waning. I want you to remember this. The pandemic is waning, and Greg Abbott long ago took executive action to snuff out all types of mandates, but it still remains a salient cause for some in Abbott's party who have championed medical freedom in the wake of the pandemic. They put medical freedom in scare quotes like Dr. Evil here. State representative from Midlothian said he voted for SB 29, calling it fine, but questioning how much it matters. He pushed for a more sweeping ban on vaccine mandates during the regular season. His quote, "Is there a single COVID-19 mandate that SB 29 will end? Probably not." He added that private vaccine mandates are alive and well in Texas despite Abbott's orders, and the state should be leading the fight against COVID tyranny. I agree with all those things. We may reach out to Brian Harrison, see if he wants to come on and talk about that, because I think it's going to become more and more necessary to discuss. This appears to be an issue that Greg Abbott wants to put in the rearview mirror, etc. Now, on top of that, if you'll go to topic number 4, we actually have a follow-up article that was written a couple weeks later. This is actually really important. This is the Texas Supreme Court saying that Greg Abbott's COVID-19 ban on local mask rules is in fact lawful. And the reason why is because leftist cities, like the one that I live north of, although not in, like Austin, have this symbolic fight where they are going after and trying to knock it down and claim that they can make mask mandates. Now, the state has already said no. What's interesting is Austin is the seat of power. It's the Washington, D.C. of the the country of Texas, if you will. It is the main leftist sort of enclave that exists. And there's other blue areas like Houston and San Antonio has some blue, and so does Dallas. But the extreme sort of weird libbies all come into Texas and in Austin. That's where they've all been moving. And moreover, they all make the laws out of there. So this is where the fight is going to be most obvious to people like Greg Abbott. But if you're doing it correctly, I think you're supposed to move to Austin, start a podcast, make $40K. If you guys saw our Friday show, you know what I'm talking about. In any case, they claim that this is settling the debate of whether or not we're going to have masking requirements, and this is all just ceremonial, and we're just making this sort of nonsensical thing. Here's what the justice said. They said we hold that during a declared disaster, the government has a lawful authority to prohibit local officials from imposing mask requirements in response to a contagious disease. So that sounds like it's pretty well settled in the state of Texas. Now, why am I bringing all this stuff up? I'm bringing it up because of something that was released over the weekend, towards the end of the Friday afternoon. This is something from Alex Jones. I have an awful lot of faith in this because I've been hearing the same kind of things. Let's play video clip number 1. And folks, I want you to just listen. This is Alex Jones may be a wild dude, but he's often right. So let's listen to number 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, I got a call yesterday. An individual was in town, and they wanted to meet with me that I know well. And they are a high-level manager in the TSA. And I went and met with them and had a cup of coffee with them. And they said, you got to warn people. Tuesday, we got called in, the managers, and told that by the middle of September, that the new policy is being written, that this is done. They were told this is happening. This is not hypothetical. You will all have to wear masks again, and so will airport employees. Then, by the middle of October, they are going to say that everyone flying has to wear a mask. And in the meetings, people began to ask them, well, I mean, why is this happening? They said, well, because of the new variant in Canada and because of the WHO, they may, declare this. But regardless, we've been told this is going to happen.
And there it is. We've been told this is going to happen. And if you think that that is not the case, you're not paying attention. The people on social media are starting to agitate. I'm starting to see more and more of these like loser troll accounts come out, and they are backing mask mandates. They're discussing how they were efficient and effective at stopping the flow. I'm getting people that are coming into my mentions now that are telling me things like, the mask was always to protect other people, not yourself. This wasn't supposed to stop the spread for you. Really? So you're telling me that those crazy people that I keep seeing in airports or walking around in the grocery store, or the 5 people that wear them at my church at Mass, those people are wearing the masks for me? I mean, thanks. How about no? How about I'd rather see your smiling face? I'm not worried about you. I don't think that's why they're wearing them. They're wearing them because they're confused sheep. And you all know that as well. There are a lot of confused sheep out there in the world at this moment, and they are looking for the next thing to be scared of because they've been running on a fear addiction for the last 3+ years. They were scared, well, maybe even 8 years. They were scared of Donald Trump. They were scared that he was going to end the world. I had a brother call me and tell me that Donald Trump had basically caused North Korea to launch missiles at them, and that was the end of their island. It turns out it was actually Joe Biden's crappy policies for aid that is going to be ending up destroying parts of Maui. But we had this ongoing fear factor that just kept going on. At any moment, it was going to be World War III. Well, guess who didn't get us into new wars? And I'm not the biggest Donald Trump fan in the world. Many of you guys know this. He's not my guy that I'm going to hang my hat on. But he is a guy that was awfully reasonable. And even people in Russia who are leftists, and I think that Tara would agree that she is a pretty left-leaning person. She's politically homeless now because Joe Biden is representing her old party. But the woman has a lot of very liberal sympathies. Maybe leftist is not accurate. Maybe liberal is more appropriate. She has a lot of the leftist sort of ideas that historically existed. And yet she can objectively look at it and say Donald Trump was a better option because the fear that they are trying to run the gamut on right now, the fear that is coming out of the mouths of these people that they are trying to reintroduce, it's addictive. It is a dopamine hit as well. It's a cortisol drop. These people are looking for what is going to be the next reason for me to maintain the fear. The people in power are doing it because they can exercise authority over you. The people that are used to being told what to do, they are looking for that comforting feeling of someone is going to rule me. And if you're an American and you want to be ruled, knock yourself out. Go live in a place that does that. Go live in New York City where they tell you how you can carry and what size soft drink you can drink. But if you want to live in a free America like some of us do, you would expect that your free thought would be the foremost. And why are they going to the TSA first, you wonder? Why would that be the first implement of it? Some of these things have never left. The mask mandates for the VA never left. Federal buildings never left. They're still out there. They still have it. All they got to do is justify that it's a high enough level. But anything in the medical sphere, when it comes to federal government monies, has that ability and they can push these things. So that's part two. But the TSA is specifically because there is a free understanding that we live in a free country with free mobility, and that is something that is trying to be restricted. Tomorrow, we're going to talk a little more about the C40 agenda, which are the 40 cities worldwide that want to restrict your access to certain things. We're going to talk about it a little bit deeper. But one of the things that they mention is air travel. They want to limit it to 1,500 miles for one round trip flight. I think it's 1,500 kilometers actually, because they're European. And so they want you to be able to stay within 700 miles, one round trip flight every 3 years. Why would they do that? Because America, this country, is a free mobility nation. We have the ability to lead between states with no checkpoints. Except if you go into California, you have the ability to travel freely on our road systems that we all pay for and see a lot of the country. And most of the country is open, free, and fair. And when you go into the big kind of constricted areas, it's really amazing. It's freer to travel from Nevada to South Carolina than it is to go the short distance from Virginia into, let's say, Connecticut. The number of tolls you have to hit in New Jersey and in New York and in Connecticut and all these little cities that are these little states that are the size of like counties where I live, these tiny little areas that are full of population density, it's very expensive to travel through them. They want to hit you for every single piece of it. And what are they doing with their tax dollars? They're using them to constrict your movement. They're trying to make it so that only people who have enough money can go around. You can take a car in Oklahoma City and you can drive all the way to Canada really, really easily in this country. It's actually pretty incredible. But the ability to restrict mobility and therefore to keep populations in small little areas, subsetted and divided from each other is the goal. It seems like. It does seem like the goal. And so what are they doing in the meantime? They're trying to get you distracted. They're going to put out the face diapers. They're going to put out all the Karens out there, the masked fascists. We need to have a good name for that. So in the chat or in the comments below, give me some good names for masked fascists. I'd like to be able to start tagging some of these out there because I see them a lot and I know they're pushing this totalitarian idea. But if they worked, they wouldn't have to convince us. And since they don't work, they have to have this messaging campaign. It's all pretty gross. And in the meantime, what do we see going on? They're trying to control you with other means. They're trying to take your money in taxation, and then they're using your money to control what you're doing or to watch what you're up to. I want to talk a little bit about something we found out. This is topic number 7. Ryan, if you would, topic number 7 is going to tell us a little bit about a recently exposed problem. This is actually coming from CNN, so I'm not going to a source that you guys are going to say is Fox News or anything else. This is a CNN left-leaning media source released Friday at 4:18 Eastern time. If you know anything about the news cycle, when they give you something that happens on a Friday afternoon, it means they are trying to bury it. It means they are putting it out in a place where you are not going to pay attention to it. House GOP subpoenas Citibank over alleged January 6th back-channel cooperation with the FBI. All right, let's break down what we're talking about. We're talking about financial surveillance that is taxpayer funded by the FBI. That means your money goes into the federal government and your money goes in and then it pays for the FBI to do what? To hunt down J6ers, except they're going to do so with the cooperation of an incredibly large bank, one of the biggest banks in this country. Now, I'm going to read the opening this just because it's worth noting the facts of the case. So Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan issues a subpoena to Citibank. Interestingly, it's part of the hunt for information on whether banks shared private customer data with the FBI after the January 6th insurrection. Obviously, a CNN piece would be absolutely remiss if they did not mention the insurrection part of it. This is a letter that was released Thursday. Initially, it just says that the Citibank declined to voluntarily provide information to lawmakers. Honestly, nobody should have voluntarily provided it to lawmakers, nor should they have voluntarily provided it to the FBI. This is the real problem. Among those 7 banks that we're talking about, it's PNC, Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, Truist, and US Bank. These are the 7 banks. Citibank was the only one that didn't voluntarily comply. I hope they also didn't voluntarily comply with the FBI. Wouldn't that be something to find out, that they wouldn't comply with the oversight committee that is represented by people that were actually elected, and that they did comply with an unelected group? We'll find out. It will come out. It'll take a while. This is not going to be something fast. And the reason why we're doing this sort of look is because Bank of America also provided information to the FBI without any legal process. And we know that because of our very own friend, George Hill, a whistleblower who went forward after his time working for the FBI in the Boston field office. The FBI's Boston field office had a list of people that did any transaction between J5 and J7 of 2021 using a Bank of America credit or debit card. Any transaction. And then they specifically filtered them by people who they know had bought guns at any time using a B of A product. That's pretty incredible stuff. B of A, Bank of America, decided to do the most un-American thing possible and move forward and show people to the FBI that owned a gun and were in DC on January 5th through 7th of 2021. No further information. No criminal predicate. This is the basis, the definition of what an intelligence case looks like. You were in the area. You own a gun, let's look at you. You'd think that would be prohibited under the First Amendment, and then you would think that since there is no allegation that they have misused the Second Amendment, that this would not be acceptable. And yet, the FBI has been able to do it, and they are doing it with impunity, and so they're trying to find out if there are other banks that were involved in this sort of nonsense. Were there other banks that were volunteering? Were they being requested by the FBI? And that's the real question. What sort of pressure was going on by the FBI? By the way, the FBI pays a fair amount of money for process when they go and they ask for records, bank records, whether it be through national security letters or subpoenas. They pay for that privilege to get access to it. The company is not required to eat it. And so there is a financial transaction that happens between the Bureau and these banks. And it's not necessarily that small. What we saw, interestingly enough, in the Twitter files is that it was like $3-something million for Twitter to produce all of the records that they were looking for. And whether you think the odds of Twitter being a larger grab by a federal law enforcement agency than, let's say, one of the major banks in America, I would say the banks probably have a lot more service and there may be actually more money involved. That would be another question we would like to see. So if you are out there and you want to hit up Jim Jordan's Judiciary Committee, if one of your representatives is on that committee, let's find out how much money goes between the FBI and these banks. I've said it here. You guys are the force multiplier. You take it to your representatives. Let's find out how much the federal government is paying our biggest banks for access to their records when they do subpoenas, and how friendly that relationship looks, what that back scratch looks like. Because all this stuff comes down to how much we are being taxed. Most of you guys know if you're in an average tax bracket, you make under, do we have a tax bracket pull up? No, I didn't put that on there. The tax brackets are basically 22, 23, 24%. Those are kind of like the most average federal tax brackets. We got a blank screen up here. Ryan's going to try to dig this up in real time for me, so bear with me, folks.
My bad.
Yeah, no worries. So it's 22, 23%. I just got some notice. Actually, this is a piece I got from the FBI. They wanted to know, they were going to charge me $10,000 for my move in 2021 if my tax bracket wasn't the proper tax bracket that they would normally assume. But the federal income taxes are just a small piece of it. Will you bring up the, let's see here. We've got the property tax topic number 6. This is from Rocket Mortgage. There you go. So your federal income tax brackets, the lowest are getting 10%, all the way up. The meat and potatoes is that 22 to 24% federal income tax bracket. Those are people that are paying that are making less than $170,000 a year. Probably most Americans are going to fit into that. And what we can do is we can look at the federal tax brackets. That's one piece of it. The second piece is that other little sneaky tax you get when you buy land, but you don't actually own it. And so what I went and looked at was the property taxes ranked by state and the percentage that people are paying. Some of these places don't have a state income tax. Some of them have this on top of a state income tax. The lowest property tax, interestingly enough, is in Hawaii. So if that's not your residence, you're paying 0.2%. If that's not your primary residence, and so you don't have to worry about whatever their income tax is, you can have property there relatively cheaply. 0.28%. And with the average home price of $615,000, you're paying about $600 a year. So that's nice. That's not so bad. Let's scroll down to the bottom of that graph, and let's see where the real tax meat comes in. Places like Texas, where we're seeing that the median home price is $172,000. It's a 1.8% tax. Now, Texas doesn't have a state income tax, so you're looking at $3,900. So if you were just making, let's say, $100,000 just for basic math, almost 4% of your overall income is going to go and pay your state property taxes in a place like Texas. And then you figure that everything you spend is going to get taxed, because we all have sales taxes, anywhere from 5 to 10% sales tax, depending on where you live. That's your consumption tax. And so not only is it being taxed on the front door on the way in your income tax, it's going to get taxed on the thing that you were already owning, which is your property tax. That just is a steady decline against it. And then anytime you want to spend the money that was already taxed, you're going to get taxed again. If you think about it, Ryan, you were saying that it was like up to 53% of your dollars that you earn are taxed. This doesn't include things like Social Security and Medicare. Those are all built into that 53%, another 6.5% plus a 1.8% for Medicare. So almost another 8% going on over there. It's like 8% here,
Yes, sir.
22% here, 10% for sales, right?
Yes.
Another 4 to 5% when you're talking about your property taxes. We are paying taxes on the front end, on the back end, and in the middle over and over again. And then we laugh because our country was founded on a revolution over a 3% tax on tea. And I think that's the thing that we've gotten away from in this country. It does bring more and more people back. It's the upside of social media. It's the upside of these conversations. It should be the number one thing being discussed in the GOP primary. And it's kind of why I'm excited about this guy, Vivek Ramaswamy, in it, because he actually had a fantastic take on this. I'm going to have you bring up video number 2, if you would, Ryan. Video number 2 is Vivek talking about what the spirit of this election season coming up in 2024 should be like. And I think a lot of you are getting there right now.
Well, I think the Ukraine-Russia conflict is a direct consequence of corruption in our own government. There's a lot of corruption in Ukraine, where they're siphoning off our money to enrich a lot of people over there. But it's easy to point the finger at somebody else's corruption. It's a lot harder to take a long, hard look in the mirror as a nation and identify that corruption at home. So big tech, government collusion, done. Big pharma, government collusion, done. Military, private, industrial military with government, done. That's the short answer. We have an anti-competitive arena. I think that anybody who has worked in the government should have a 10-year hiatus at minimum to work in an industry that they've been responsible for contracting with or regulating. That's just basic table stakes. I mean, the lobbying is really where a lot of this begins. And I have a lot more solutions beyond this. I personally believe that if I, as the next U.S. president, can't work for the taxpayer and collect a paycheck from them for more than 8 years, which I think is a good thing, then neither should pretty much any of those federal bureaucrats reporting into me either. Somebody shouldn't be able to work for the federal government for more than 8 years continuously. That's when the corruption and the rot and the entitlement and the ossification of bureaucracy begins. And so, we can continue. I could give you a list of policy prescriptions, shutting down agencies, legal authority to do it. I've done this elsewhere. But this is not incremental reform. This is revolution when it comes to that deep state.
He talks dramatically about the spirit of 1776 and the fact that this is revolution. We're not talking about a basic election. We are talking about a bloodless revolution. That is what is on the counter right now. I want to give a little bit of more context about the piece about property taxes that blew my mind. When I was graduating high school, which was in the year 2000, I just pulled the stuff up here on my phone, so I'm just reading it right off. This is from the United States Census Bureau. The median value of a U.S. home was $119,000. $119,000. Now, remember your basic math. Your median is the middle point in the highest and the lowest value. If you string all the values of all the homes from left to right, the one that's like closest to the middle is $119,000. which is not the same as an average, which is going to be when you take all of the homes and you divide them by the number of homes. You have the value of the homes and you divide it by the number. Here's the really interesting percent. That $119,600 mark is an 18% increase over 10 years. Okay? From 1990 to 2000, it went from 101,100 to 119,600, an 18% increase in value. Well, that's a lot of money over 10 years, but it's an incremental gain. Now let's look at what the average home price is now, 23 years later. Has it gone up by 18% over 10 years times 2? No. It's gone up by 400%. The average home price, and they claim also the median home price in the United States right now is $416,100. A $400,000+ house when I was in high school would have been for people who are wealthy. In my memory, I recall that a $400,000 house was out of the reach of most Americans. It is now the average and the median, according to Fools, which is the Motley Fool's website. Their Fool's research says it is the same. And that is a 26% increase in the last 3 years since 2020, where it was $329,000. We've seen a massive inflation in the cost of property. So what does that do to your tax rates? What it does is it artificially inflates the amount of money that you're going to be paying against, because normally you'd be paying, let's say 4% of your income, and that's pretty well fixed because it's based on the value of your property. If your property is increasing at a reasonable rate, then you're going to actually have the same amount taken out of your paycheck. But when you have a property tax that is against a property that is exploding in value, I saw somebody in the chat just say a second ago that their property tax doubled in the last 2 years. If that is the case, if you have your property taxes doubling, you are seeing more and more erosion of your actual fundamental wealth. It's taking things that you own that should be increasing in value that you shouldn't necessarily be paying on at a higher rate, and you are getting more and more taxed on it. Plus, we are seeing a weakening of the value of the dollar with the inflation. We are seeing more and more nasty stuff going on, and we're paying for it. Where does it go? Like, where is this money that we are sending into the federal government, to the local and the state resources go? They're going into bizarre programs that are antithetical to American freedoms. By the way, the consensus is we are somewhere between a tie on dumbass and mask hole. So if you have a vote, whether you think dumbass or mask hole is a preferable term for people that are the fascists that are pushing masks, please put that in the chat, or put it more appropriately, put it down in the comments, because we actually want to keep track of this thing. I may do a Twitter poll, in fact. So at Kyle Seraphin is the Twitter account. You guys can go check that thing out. What are we spending all this money on? If you'll bring up topic number 10, Ryan, I think people are going to be absolutely shocked to know that even though we have some decent ideas in our government occasionally, they all end up being about the worst way that you can spend money. I always say that government is probably the worst solution to any problem, except when it's the only solution. Topic 10 is going to show us, it's a story from Gateway Pundit. It's going to tell us exactly where this money goes. Yeah, no problem. So I'm just going to start reading ahead, folks. We're going to start talking about this thing. This is a report that's coming in right now. The Biden administration sold $300 million worth of border wall parts, huge chunks of steel, massive amounts of raw materials that were all laying waste in the desert, just hanging out, collecting dust and rust, things that were all getting oxidized, like hanging out there. They sold it for $2 million. They took your money that is being inflated and taxed at an incredible rate. They put it into the federal government. The federal government went through some awful hiring and buying process. And then they turned around, spent all the money, so a bunch of contractors made money, and those same contractors could turn around and bid and buy it for $2 million. This is Gateway Pundit and Jim Hoff reporting it. This is going out as of yesterday. This is a Sunday news story that I saw. Many of you will not see this if you were not paying attention. So meanwhile, we've got 7 million individuals, per the Gateway Pundit, coming in under Joe Biden's regime in the last 2 years. 7 million walking across our border, and the border wall that we had already paid for, that was already U.S. taxpayer dollars, sunk costs, were just left out there in the desert, not installed, hanging out in Yuma, Arizona, and then being sold for $2 million. Interesting. We're going to have to find out who, in fact, was the buyer of this thing. I would be shocked if it wasn't the same people who were the original manufacturers of it. The Daily Caller has reported on this as well. And what we saw was a report that was coming out by Maria Bartiromo, who was actually sharing this. But End of the day, we're taking all of our money. It is being taken away at a higher rate, devalued and inflated, put into a government program, and then they're spitting in our face by not even using it for what it was for and giving it right back to the people that originally were in that business. And that is not the way that you want to spend your money. That is not the thing that you should be voting for. Anybody who votes for it is complicit. And moreover, there's all this crying about why the Biden administration has not been helping out the people of Hawaii. Hawaii is one of the bluest places that you can find. It has some of the most stupid and corrupt local government run by bullies. If you haven't seen any of the videos out there where somebody is trying to ask a question, there's like this, local official who's trying to say he was the guy that was in charge of the federal warning system that was funded by a bunch of tax dollars on whether or not they would let people know if there was a wildfire or a tsunami or any other approaching, dangerous hurricane, things like that. And they chose not to activate that early warning system. The reporter asks a question and says, "Hey, how come you guys didn't do that? And have you changed your mind? Do you feel good about it now that this happened?" And this enormous Samoan-looking guy steps up and basically just goes like, "He already answered the question, like shut your mouth." It looks like a mob movie. It looks like a mob movie where the mob is standing behind some poor government official and they're pulling the strings on it. And that's what happens. That's what happens when you give your money to the federal government. You've got a big bully that is pushing things around, and you've got all of us basically getting the short end of the stick. I want to talk about something that came up because somebody brought this up the other day. Nobody really understands how this process works. It's another thing that your tax dollars are funding. This is a thing called InfraGard. It's topic number 8, Ryan, if you want to bring it up. InfraGard is an FBI program that is very, very related to what was going on with the Citibank, with the idea that banks would freely give over information. Now, what you're seeing right now is a brochure. If you're watching on the Rumble channel, if you're not, you're missing out on seeing the brochure, a government brochure at that, which is defending our nation's most critical asset. The mission of InfraGard is to enhance the nation's ability to collect and address and mitigate threats inside the United States through critical infrastructure by fostering cooperation, education, and information sharing through robust private sector and government partnerships. I'm going to say it again, robust private sector and government partnerships. In order to accomplish this mission, they promote an ongoing dialogue and timely communication between members and the FBI through local, regional, national programs. The scary things are the local and the regional, the national is expected. InfraGard, which you can find information about at InfraGard, G-A-R-D, there's no U in InfraGard.org. This is a alliance for national infrastructure protection. Anytime that you hear national and protection, you should be concerned. They're showing you, Ryan's giving you kind of a little view of what their brochure looks like. This is a program where mediocre FBI employees that no longer want to do the thing that people expect of FBI employees, which is to say work criminal cases and go find bad guys. What they do is they go out and they say, "I'm tired of working cases. I want to shake hands and kiss babies for a little bit." They go out to the public. They go find friends in local industry, and they go find companies that might hire them when they retire. That's a really big thing on it. It's a government hiring retirement hack. So they go out and they forge these partnerships. And they basically get buy-in from local business by getting to be associated with the FBI, which the local business might either find intimidating or cool. And they do this so that when the FBI comes and knocks on their door and says, "Hey, we'd really like this information. And by the way, I know you're part of InfraGard, and I know that we have a good working relationship. We'd rather not have to go through the niceties of getting a subpoena or any of the government process. We'd love it if you just handed it over because it's easy and we're lazy and we've been doing all this work being your friend, and it's really hard to say no to a friend." This is the number one rule they teach you when you are in sales. You make a friend first because saying no to a friend is the hardest thing to do. And now we have a publicly funded program of the FBI, the Department of Justice, going out and recruiting businesses in the same way that we would recruit a source. It's a tripwire program in some ways, so they want you to be able to tip them off when things are going wrong. And some of that's not terrible. But the backside payoff is when you're buddies with the FBI, when the FBI comes and knocks on your door and asks for something, then you give them a list of all the Americans who bought guns and used their credit card January 5th to January 7th of 2021 because insurrection. That's why. InfraGard is one of the dirtiest sort of things that exists out there, and it is classic. And I'm confident there are other government agencies running them. I just know about this one because I worked with people who were in this. And what's funny is I've seen some very favorable pro-FBI, pro-government position spokespeople coming out of the Washington field office. A guy named Pete Lapp was one of them. I knew Pete Lapp. This was Pete Lapp's gig. He was an incompetent agent who did nothing. He was lazy. He reminded me of Pete the Cat in a lot of ways. He just wanted to like hang out and be groovy and play his guitar and hang out in Loudoun County. Okay, that kind of guy is who works for InfraGard. Badge, gun, no interest in being any of those things, was hitting on my ugly, weird boss, spent his time in the office just kind of lurking around and then going making friends and trying to find a retirement gig. And he wrote a book about a case he worked when he was an agent that he'd been in for like 2 or 3 years. That was like what he hung his hat on. So this is a place where they put agents who don't want to do any work. They go out there and they just recruit sources that are not officially sources that are going to give information to the Bureau without them having to go through all of the important and constitutionally required protections, which is that there should be an adversarial relationship between businesses and the federal government. These businesses do not want to be buddies with the federal government, but they are bringing them in under the sort of carrot and stick thing. It's the same stuff we saw in the Twitter files. If you are not paying attention to this, this is what has happened over the last couple of years. The federal government basically, from the legislative side, promises a bunch of dangerous and expensive regulations and compliance, or you can be our buddy and you can help us out. And that's why we got a lot of social media doing censorship. Whenever you hear things like private sector government partnerships, you should think the word industrial complex. That's what it is. In this case, this is the information industrial complex, which became the censorship apparatus that Michael Schellenberger talks about. When you hear things in the military, the private sector, public government engagement, those things are called the military industrial complex. And that always comes down to the same exact stuff. It comes down to the person at the highest level of these agencies, government departments. They take their knowledge of who signs the check for the contract, usually because it's the person that's filling their old job. They go and work for the place that's going to look for that check. And they come in and they lobby their old buddy who just took their old job, who's sitting in their old desk. Hey, how about you sign a check for this new company I work for? It'd be really helpful for the country. It'd be really helpful for me. They've been really favorable to our agency. We have a partnership. That is the illegal, or the legalized corruption that Vivek was talking about in that video. And this has to stop. It has to stop because they are just taking all of your money and they are giving it to themselves. And they're doing so through inflated prices and tyranny and keeping you distracted by putting a bunch of mask holes out there. I really like that one, by the way. Mask holes is pretty good. We will do the survey, but I want to know. All these dumbasks are out there they're gonna be out there trying to push COVID tyranny on you. And in the meantime, they're devaluing a dollar, they're increasing the price of your property, and they are basically putting you so that you are working paycheck to paycheck, even when you weren't before. So that you are in a place that is the most difficult. Even if you owned your own property, you no longer own it because you still have to pay your tithe to the government every year. And that tithe percentage is increasing as these fake property values continue to increase. And don't think that your local and your city governments are not in on it. They are. They want a piece of it too. They're looking around saying, well, if everything's worth more money, that must mean people have more money. No, it's a cycle of abuse. It is a cycle of abuse by our federal government in this way, in a big, big way. I want to bring and highlight one last little piece out there. We are dealing with a culture war. We're dealing with sort of this primary season where we should be talking about real issues, where we should be talking about this spirit of revolution, this culture of revolution that exists in America and always has. And in the meantime, we're getting distracted by people who are mad and they're going to have this sort of division inside the conservative movement, specifically the Republican Party. This is a little video that has gone more viral than I would have expected, and good for her. Brianna Watley, who came on our show and spoke. You guys will remember her from a couple weeks back. She put this out. She is a Florida resident, a 16-year-old who is spot on, about to go back to school for her junior year, and she's pissed off at her governor, which I think many of you are also frustrated with. Like, I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't really care who wins the Republican primary. I'd like to see somebody who's willing to talk about the things that Vivek is, because that's where I really care about things, whether you like him or not. The messaging he has is really spot on. But in the meantime, we're doing this Trump DeSantis nonsense. And here's her take on the so-called listless vessels who follow Trump. Go ahead and play video cup number 3 when you're ready.
I find it hilarious that Ron DeSantis, a politician with no opinions of his own, calls Trump supporters listless vessels. Am I a listless vessel for believing that our economy was stronger under President Trump? Am I a listless vessel for believing that President Trump is being politically prosecuted? Am I a listless vessel for supporting President Trump ever? I live in Florida, and it's a shame that Ron is running around Iowa and New Hampshire when the people of my state my family included, voted for him to represent us, not give Lincoln dinner speeches in New Hampshire and kiss babies in Iowa. Come back home, Ron. There's a lot of work to do here in Florida. Inflation is twice the national average, there's the property insurance crisis, and you have unconstitutional red flag laws on the books. I get that Ron is desperate, I get that his campaign is flopping harder than New Coke in the 80s, but it's low to attack the proud supporters of President Trump, much like millions of Trump supporters proudly called themselves deplorables after Hillary said it first. I'm proud to call myself a listless vessel. You, Ron, you're something a little different. You're a sinking anchor.
Eek. You know what I don't understand? How does that girl know about New Coke from the 80s? Like, I think there's people my age that don't remember New Coke. Yeah, she was spot on.
I barely did till she said it.
So I went back and I looked at that speech because I was like, okay, did Ron get taken out of context, as so often happens by people that are on one side or another? And the thing that I found that was most weak about what he said, not the part about the listless vessels, although I do think that's his deplorable moment. That's his, the Hillary Clinton deplorable moment. He's just branded a bunch of people that follow his political opponent in a way that is not particularly favorable, and it will not play out well. Here's the thing that he said. He said we need to be more concerned about the durability of the movement, and that it can't just be about what one man says and a bunch of people who are listless vessels just sort of like swaying in the tides that are going to be following whatever he says. He's obviously going after Trump supporters. I think I said it more eloquently than he did just there. But the thing that is troubling with me is he said a durability of the movement. And we're talking about a man in Donald Trump that has basically gotten significant popular support and growing and durable popular support since 2015. So how damn durable do you need to be in politics to be able to say that it is durable? It's certainly more durable than any sort of wave of support that you could say is going for Ron DeSantis. And once again, I actually don't care on there. I did see Big Wave Sunny Days was asking whether or not I'm okay with Chris Christie. I'm talking about serious candidates here for what it's worth. I think DeSantis is a serious candidate, whether you like it or not. I think Vivek is a serious candidate only on the strength of his ideas, and he continues to poll higher and higher. So he's serious as well. And obviously Trump is the front runner who's running away with it at this point. But anything can happen. Things can get weird. If you're not going to go out there and commit to a full pardon and getting Trump out of all this nonsense, then I think that's a DOA scenario for me, because we cannot have our political opponents weaponized or have the mechanisms of government weaponized against political opponents. It's totally intolerable. Doesn't matter who it is. And Chris Christie, I can't vote for somebody that weight, period. There's this meme that says, do you think less of my opinions because I'm fat? The answer is yes, I do. In his case, the guy has every possibility to not be whatever he is. Just, it's America in 2023. There are TV cameras. Just get after it, dude. I don't know what you need to do to not be so big, but stop being three men. You're not bringing three men's worth of ideas. So hard pass on all of that. All right. I think that's as deep as I want to get into any of this stuff today. We are going to talk about the C40, the cities, the 40 cities in the world that are going to go and try to be part of this freedom restriction. But I just want people to be so aware that they are taking your tax dollars and they are funding things like mask mandates and selling off our border wall and pushing these things along. In the meanwhile, they're all cheapening your stuff. She actually hit on some other crises too. This erosion of liberty, whether it be red flag laws, all this stuff has been normalized by leftist talking points. They just keep pushing and pushing, and we keep kind of going okay, well, maybe if we give them what they want. What we know is this: it doesn't matter what you give them. You have to stop. Progressives are, by their nature, going to constantly push things forward. Conservatives must conserve something. And if you're not going to conserve the basic liberties of your financial freedom, your ability to self-determine where your money goes, and your own choices with your body and your face and your ability to travel, then you are missing out on what the conservative movement is about. Conservatives are supposed to try to hold a line. So figure it out. When you say never again, it's got to mean a lot of things. It means you never accept tyranny, and that starts locally. We're going to be bringing on some guests in the near future talking about, pushing back against tyranny in your own area. That has to be done at a local level, but it also starts right in your own mind, in your own cognitive infrastructure, as the CISA folks would have us believe. It starts where you decide that you are not going to tolerate anything of the sort. You will not allow it to progress in your own household, and that expands to your community, and then you can move on to your city and your county and your state and your country. But it has to start individually. You have to push back right now. And speaking of pushing, scroll on down to the like button on Rumble and push the like button so that it shows green and you give us one of those thumbs up. You rumble us. We do appreciate all of that. We appreciate you guys listening, and I hope you go into your week with a little bit of fire. And you have been listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, which has been streamed live from Texas, America, where we have outlawed mask rules, and the Texas Supreme Court says that that is okay. If you're looking for free places, look around and find out what's going on in your community. Make sure they are passing laws and they are making pushbacks before the tyranny comes down, because it's coming. If you're not feeling it, you just have to get on social media for a few minutes and see that the Karens are out. The mask holes, the dumb masks, they are pushing it, and it is coming back for us. That is not on accident. There is a coordinated effort to make this stuff happen. I want to say thanks to you all for listening. I want to say thanks for the 5-star reviews we get. We are up to 660 of them. We're trying to get to 1,000 by the end of the year. I think we can do so. This one is from PH69312. Says, hanging out with Kyle. I've been following from the start, and I never miss an episode. If you want to know what's going on behind the scenes, Kyle's your guy. Listening to his show is like hanging out with an interesting good friend. My only quote-unquote complaint is that his show always ends too soon. 10 out of 10. I only suggest 3 podcasts to friends. Dan Bongino, Dark Delight, that's Tracy Beans, and Kyle. Everyone else is background noise. That is very kind, and I will tell you that those 2 are people I listen to as well. When I get a free moment and I'm in podcast mode, the only other one I add is Adam Carolla. If you guys want to listen to Adam and Dr. Drew, it's 30 minutes. It's usually like a 27-minute piece, including the ad reads on there. And they are a cultural pushback with some humor, which we sorely need at this point, because if we get too serious, we won't be able to be functional. But you got to at least understand the issues, and Dan does a fantastic job, and Tracy does a great job as well, making sure you are aware. We do our best to keep educating you, and some of that is because of the hard work and the skill of our producer, Ryan Matta, who is not in Texas at the moment. He is on the ones and twos, spinning out videos and bringing up all of these topics that we've been working through. So we do really appreciate Ryan. You can follow him at Ryan Matta Media, M-A-T-T-A Media, M-E-D-I-A. I don't know why I'm spelling things out, but we are Ryan Matta Media on Twitter, or find him on True Social at Ryan Matta, M-A-T-T-A. Again, don't forget to like this video on Rumble. Scroll on down. If you are not listening on Rumble, you can join us in the mornings at 9:30 Eastern Time, 8:30 Texas America, rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin, and you can follow us pretty much everywhere on social medias at Kyle Seraphin. Folks, we will see you again tomorrow, and we'll be talking the C40, the cities in this country, in this world rather, that want to shut down your mobility and your freedom. They want you to own nothing and make you happy about it. We'll see you again. See you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.